What happens when Hollywood's most down-to-earth action star walks onto a talk show stage, only to be attacked by a host who seems to have forgotten basic respect? It only took one dismissive comment about his blue-collar roots to turn a friendly interview into the most shocking exit in daytime television history. The audience settling into their seats had no idea they were about to witness something that would be replayed and talked about for years to come. Mark Wahlberg walked out onto the set of the Jennifer Hudson show with his trademark humble smile, waving to the crowd as they cheered. He looked relaxed, wearing a simple button-down shirt and jeans, the kind of outfit that reminded everyone he was still that kid from Boston who made it big but never forgot where he came from. Jennifer Hudson sat behind her desk, her smile wide, but something felt off. There was a sharpness in her eyes that the audience couldn't quite place yet. As Mark sat down across from her, the applause died down, and she leaned forward with her hands clasped together. "So, Mark," she began, her voice dripping with a strange condescension, "you've come such a long way from your little neighborhood in Boston. Must be nice to finally be around real success." The audience laughed nervously, unsure if it was a joke or something more. Mark's smile faltered just slightly. He tilted his head and responded with grace. "I've always been around success, Jennifer. My family, my community. Those were successful people. They worked hard every single day." Jennifer waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away his words like flies. "Oh, please, let's be honest. You went from nothing to something. That's the real story. You should be grateful that Hollywood took a chance on someone like you." The air in the studio shifted. Someone like you. Those words hung there, heavy and loaded. Mark's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure, sitting up a little straighter in his chair. "Someone like me?" he repeated slowly, his Boston accent becoming more pronounced. "What exactly does that mean?" Jennifer laughed, but it was cold, almost mocking. "You know what I mean. No training, no background in the arts, just a rapper turned actor. Most people in your position would have ended up nowhere. But here you are, sitting on my show." The audience had gone completely silent now. This wasn't playful banter anymore. This was something else entirely. Mark leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, and when he spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "Jennifer, I worked for everything I have. Every single thing. I didn't have it handed to me. I earned respect by showing up, doing the work, and treating people right. That's what my parents taught me. That's what my neighborhood taught me." Jennifer rolled her eyes, actually rolled her eyes on camera, and let out an exaggerated sigh. "Here we go with the humble origins speech. Look, we get it. You're from the streets. But let's talk about the real reason you're successful. It's because people like me, people with real talent, real training, opened doors for people like you. You should show a little more appreciation." The gasps from the audience were audible now. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One woman in the front row had her hand over her mouth, in shock. Mark's publicist, sitting off stage, looked like she was about to faint. Mark stared at Jennifer for a long moment, and you could see him processing what was happening. He nodded slowly, more to himself than to her, and then he spoke with a measured tone that somehow made his words even more powerful. "I appreciate the people who helped me along the way. I appreciate every director, every cast member, every crew person who gave their all on set. But I will not sit here and be disrespected. I won't let you diminish where I come from or the people who raised me." Jennifer leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms with a smirk that suggested she was enjoying this confrontation. "Disrespected? Mark, I'm just being honest. You're sensitive. Maybe that's why you play all those tough guy roles, to compensate." That was it. That was the moment. Mark's expression changed completely. The politeness drained from his face, and what replaced it was pure disappointment mixed with resolve. He stood up from his chair, and the audience collectively held their breath. You know what, Jennifer? I came here to have a conversation, to talk about my work, to connect with people, but I'm not going to sit here and let you talk down to me or where I'm from. That's not happening. He reached up and unclipped the small microphone from his shirt. The sound of the clip releasing echoed through the studio's speakers, loud in the shocked silence. Jennifer's smirk faded. She sat up straighter, suddenly realizing this was actually happening. Mark, don't be so dramatic. Sit down. We're not done with the interview. But Mark was already coiling the mic wire, placing it carefully on the side table next to the guest chair. He looked directly at Jennifer, and when he spoke, every word carried weight. We're done. I don't need this. I don't need to be on a show where the host thinks she's better than her guests. You want to talk about real talent? Real talent is treating people with dignity, no matter where they come from. Jennifer's face flushed red. She stood up from behind her desk, her voice rising. You can't just walk off my show. Do you know how many people would love to be in that chair? Mark turned to face her fully, and his response was cutting in its simplicity. Then get one of them, because I'm not staying where I'm not respected. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. Some people started clapping hesitantly. Others just watched in stunned amazement. Mark turned toward the audience and gave them a small, apologetic nod, as if to say, sorry you had to see that, before heading toward the stage exit. Jennifer's voice called after him, now with a desperate edge that revealed her panic. This is completely unprofessional. You're acting like a child. Mark stopped at the edge of the stage and looked back one final time. His voice was steady, unbothered. No, Jennifer. A child throws tantrums and insults people to make themselves feel important. I'm walking away because I know my worth, and I know I don't have to accept being treated like I'm less than anyone else. And with that, he walked off the stage. The camera operators didn't know where to point their cameras. One stayed on Mark's retreating figure. Another swung back to Jennifer, who stood frozen behind her desk, her mouth slightly open, clearly not prepared for this outcome. Her producers were scrambling off stage, talking frantically into their headsets. The audience sat in complete shock, some whispering to each other, others pulling out their phones. This was the moment. This was the explosion everyone would talk about. Jennifer tried to recover, picking up her notes with shaking hands. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break and, we'll be right back. But her voice lacked confidence. The damage was done. The awkward silence that followed as they cut to commercial was deafening. Audience members were already texting, already posting, already spreading the word about what they had just witnessed. Backstage, Mark walked past the stunned crew members with his head held high. His publicist rushed up to him, her face a mixture of concern and something else, maybe pride. Mark, are you okay? He nodded, his expression softening now that he was away from the cameras. I'm fine. I'm not going to let anyone talk to me like that. Not for a TV appearance. Not for anything. One of the makeup artists, a young woman who had been working in television for years, caught up with him in the hallway. Mr. Wahlberg, I just want to say, you did the right thing. What she said was out of line. Way out of line. Mark gave her a genuine smile. The first real smile since he'd sat down for the interview. Thanks. I appreciate that. My mom always told me, you teach people how to treat you. If you accept disrespect, that's what you'll get. Back on the stage, during the commercial break, Jennifer was in full crisis mode. Her producers surrounded her, all talking at once. What were you thinking? This is going to be everywhere. We need damage control now. But Jennifer's pride wouldn't let her back down completely. She shook her head, defensive. He's overreacting. I was just being real with him. He couldn't handle it. One of her senior producers, a woman who had been in the business for decades, spoke up with barely contained frustration. Jennifer, you insulted his background, his career, his entire journey, on camera. This isn't about him being sensitive. This is about you crossing a line. The words stung, and Jennifer's face showed it, but she crossed her arms and looked away, not ready to accept responsibility for what had just happened. Meanwhile, in his dressing room, Mark gathered his things. His security team stood by, ready to escort him out of the building. One of them, a former police officer who had worked with Mark for years, spoke quietly. "That took guts, boss. Not many people would walk away like that." Mark zipped up his bag and slung it over his shoulder. "It's not about guts. It's about self-respect. I've worked too hard and come too far to let someone make me feel small. No amount of publicity is worth that." As he walked toward the exit, several crew members stopped what they were doing to watch him pass. A camera operator gave him a subtle thumbs up. A sound technician nodded with respect. They had all heard what happened, and it was clear whose side they were on. The hallway seemed longer than usual, each step taking Mark further away from the disaster that had unfolded. His phone was already buzzing in his pocket with texts and calls, but he ignored them for now. There would be time to deal with the aftermath later. Right now, he just wanted to leave with his dignity intact. Back in the studio, they were coming back from commercial break. Jennifer had composed herself somewhat, but the confidence she usually exuded was gone. She looked directly at the camera, her smile forced. "Welcome back, everyone. As you saw, Mark Wahlberg has decided to leave our show today. We're going to move on to our next segment." But the audience wasn't buying it. The energy in the room had completely changed. What was supposed to be a fun, lighthearted talk show had become something uncomfortable and tense. People whispered to each other, their phones out, already watching the clips that were starting to circulate online. One audience member, a middle-aged man in the third row, stood up and started walking toward the exit. Then another person followed, and another. Within minutes, nearly a quarter of the audience had quietly left their seats, unwilling to continue watching after what they had witnessed. Jennifer's eyes widened as she watched people leave. Her voice cracked slightly as she tried to continue. "Okay, well, for those of you still with us, let's bring out our next guest." But the damage was irreversible. The show that was supposed to showcase Jennifer's charm and interviewing skills had instead revealed something much darker. Her inability to treat her guest with basic respect had backfired in the most public way possible. Outside the studio, Mark climbed into his car, finally checking his phone. Messages of support were already flooding in. Fellow actors, directors, even people from his old neighborhood, reaching out to say they were proud of him for standing up for himself. One text from a fellow Boston native simply read, "That's how we do it. You don't forget where you came from, and you don't let anyone make you feel less than. Respect, brother." Mark smiled, feeling the weight of the situation finally settling on his shoulders, but not in a bad way. In a way that felt right. He had made the choice that aligned with his values, and that mattered more than any television appearance ever could. His driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Where to, Mr. Wahlberg?" Mark leaned back in his seat, letting out a long breath. "Home. Let's go home." As the car pulled away from the studio, Mark looked out the window at the Los Angeles streets passing by. He thought about his mother, about the lessons she had taught him growing up, about respect, about dignity, about never letting anyone make you feel inferior without your consent. She would have been proud of him today. That thought alone made everything worth it. Inside the studio, the show continued, but it was a shell of what it should have been. Jennifer went through the motions, interviewing her remaining guests, but her heart wasn't in it. Every time she glanced at the empty chair where Mark had been sitting, she was reminded of the moment everything went wrong. The crew worked efficiently, but the usual camaraderie was gone. People did their jobs, but there was an undercurrent of disappointment, of disillusionment. They had all seen their host reveal a side of herself that was ugly and uncalled for, and it changed the way they saw her. When the show finally wrapped for the day, the studio cleared out faster than usual. No one wanted to linger. No one wanted to process what had happened in that space. They all just wanted to go home and distance themselves from the mess. Jennifer sat alone in her dressing room, finally looking at her phone. The internet had exploded. Videos of the confrontation were everywhere. Comment sections were brutal, nearly unanimous in their support of Mark and their condemnation of her behavior. One comment summed up the general sentiment. She showed her true colors today. Mark Wahlberg handled that with more grace than she deserved. He's a real one. Another read. Imagine being so full of yourself that you insult someone's entire background on live television. Jennifer Hudson forgot that respect goes both ways. Mark did the right thing by walking out. The praise for Mark was overwhelming. People appreciated his calm demeanor, his firm boundaries, his refusal to engage in a screaming match. He had taken the high road while still standing his ground, and audiences recognized and respected that. For Jennifer, the reality was setting in. This wasn't just a bad interview. This was a defining moment that would follow her, that would change how people saw her. She had let her ego get the best of her, and the cost was higher than she could have imagined. Her phone rang. It was her manager, and she knew this conversation was going to be difficult. She let it ring once, twice, 3 times before finally answering. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was not happy. "Jennifer, what were you thinking? This is everywhere. We need to talk about how to handle this." But there was no handling it. Not really. The moment had happened, been recorded, been shared millions of times. There was no taking it back. Miles away, Mark was home now, sitting on his back porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunset. His phone continued to buzz with messages of support, but he had put it on silent. He didn't need validation from others to know he had done the right thing. His wife came out and sat beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" Mark nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "Yeah, I'm good. Better than good, actually. I stood up for myself today, for my family, for everyone who's ever been made to feel less than because of where they come from." She squeezed his shoulder, pride evident in her eyes. "Your mom would be so proud." Mark smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Yeah, she would." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Mark felt at peace. The interview had been a disaster, but his response had been authentic. He had shown the world that success doesn't mean you have to tolerate disrespect, that standing up for yourself is always the right choice, and that where you come from should be a source of pride, never shame. The talk show moment that was supposed to be routine had become extraordinary, but not in the way Jennifer Hudson had hoped. It became a lesson in humility, in respect, in the importance of treating everyone with dignity, regardless of their path to success. And for Mark Wahlberg, it became another example of why he had earned the respect of millions. Not just for his acting, not just for his success, but for his character, his integrity, and his unwavering commitment to staying true to himself and his roots. The next morning, headlines everywhere told the story, but they didn't need to sensationalize it or add drama. The facts spoke for themselves. A host had crossed a line. A guest had responded with grace and strength, and the world had watched, learned, and chose a side. Mark woke up to messages from colleagues, friends, and fans, all echoing the same sentiment. He had handled the situation perfectly. He had shown that you can be firm without being aggressive, that you can demand respect without raising your voice, and that walking away is sometimes the strongest move you can make. In Hollywood, where egos often run wild and conflict is usually handled through publicists and lawyers, Mark's direct, honest approach was refreshing. He didn't hide behind statements or deflect blame. He simply stood up, stated his worth, and left. That authenticity resonated with people everywhere. Construction workers in Boston, teachers in the Midwest, nurses on the night shift, all saw themselves in Mark's response. They knew what it felt like to be underestimated, to have their hard work dismissed, to be looked down upon by those who thought they were better. And they had all wished, at some point, that they could respond the way Mark did, with dignity, with strength, with an unshakable sense of self-worth. The story wasn't just about a celebrity walking off a talk show. It was about something much deeper. It was about respect, about pride in your origins, about refusing to let anyone diminish your journey. Mark didn't need Jennifer Hudson's show. He didn't need the platform or the publicity. What he needed, what everyone needs, is to be treated with basic human decency. And when that wasn't offered, he made the choice that aligned with his values. That choice reverberated far beyond the studio walls. It sparked conversations in living rooms, break rooms, and coffee shops. People debated, discussed, and ultimately agreed that Mark had done exactly what needed to be done. As the days went on, the support only grew stronger. Fellow actors shared their own stories of being disrespected in interviews. Fans created tribute videos celebrating Mark's humble beginnings and incredible career. People from his old neighborhood posted throwback photos and stories about the kid who made it big but never forgot where he came from. And through it all, Mark remained quiet, letting his actions speak for themselves. He didn't do press tours explaining his decision. He didn't write lengthy social media posts defending himself. He simply moved forward, back to work, back to his family, back to living his life with the same integrity that had guided him through that difficult moment. Because that's what real strength looks like. Not in grand gestures or public declarations, but in quiet confidence, in knowing your worth, in standing firm when it matters most. The interview that was supposed to last 30 minutes had ended in less than 10, but those 10 minutes said more about character, respect, and dignity than hours of conversation ever could. Mark Wahlberg had walked onto that stage as a guest. He walked off as a reminder to everyone watching that success means nothing if you lose yourself along the way, and that the truest measure of a person is how they respond when disrespected. He chose grace. He chose strength. He chose himself. And in doing so, he showed the world exactly why he had earned every bit of success that came his way.